see the world through other people's eyes. Now, empathy is a quality of character that can change the world.
Hi, it's Edwin Rutsch from the Center for Building a Culture of Empathy, and today I'm here with Victoria Kindle Hodson, and we're going to talk about how can we build a culture of empathy in the education system. So thank you very much, Victoria, for joining me today. And I thought first we could introduce you. You've done so much, as I was just saying previously, that it's going to be hard for me to introduce you because you've written books, you've got a couple websites, you've been in the education field for a long time, and you have a game. So perhaps you could just kind of give an overview of kind of all the work that you've done around education. And I have your websites up here. I'll show some of them.
Good. Thank you for doing that, Edwin. I appreciate that. And thanks for this opportunity. It really is a pleasure to think into this subject of a culture of empathy. I think I've wanted it since I was 3 years old. So that has sparked a lot of output, a lot of thought, a lot of output. I have these two organizations, the Learning Success Institute, which I've been in now for 22, 23 years, and developing materials and programs, actual school interventions to establish this culture of empathy, of child-centered education, respect for the developmental stages of young people. So that's one thing I've done, and I've written the book, Discover Your Child's Learning Style, co-authored it with Mariama Willis. It's been out there about 12 years, and so a lot of thought about the nature of the child and what we can do in education systems.
Well, I'm looking on the No Fault Zone site here, and you've got a bunch of books. Compassionate Classroom.
Yeah, that's my other business, is Kindle Heart Communication and the No Fault Zone. That's the website you're on, Edwin. And we've got the Compassionate Classroom. We've got this is with Sarah Hart. The No Fault Classroom, and then we've got Respectful Parents, Respectful Kids, which is the arm of this, the hand reaching out to parents to be part of all this. Schools doing it is one piece of the puzzle. Parents are another. We don't get very far one without the others. So I'm happy to have that. Respectful Parents for parenting, and then the No Fault Classroom and the No Fault. And the Compassionate Classroom for teachers. And then, of course, out of the No Fault Classroom came the No Fault Zone game, which I'm really excited about because it just makes the skills of empathy and communication accessible to everybody, 3 years old to 103.
Yeah, so we just held a panel discussion about that a couple of days ago. So anyone can watch a whole hour discussion with 6 of us talking about it and kind of really going into depth about the game.
Yeah, that was great fun. Thank you for that.
So the question that I'm really exploring is, how do we build a culture of empathy? And how do we do that in the education system? So what are kind of your thoughts about that? I mean, you've really thought about this, and if we can kind of go through some of those ideas of how we transform schools and education. And
yeah, and it's all one piece. The parents, the education, the parenting, and the teaching, the way universities train teachers, it's all one piece. And I think that the culture actually starts with the culture of empathy starts with each of us as adults learning self-empathy.
So it's kind of like an individual. We have to start with our own what's going on with us individually.
Yes, because that influences so much of how we come to others, how we'll meet that child if we're the parent, how we'll meet that child if we're the teacher. And so the book, The Compassionate Classroom, is an in-depth self-empathy for teachers. In many ways, I see that book as handling that piece that comes first. And really going in there and finding out, what is it that, why did I get into this education field in the first place? What drew me? What are my needs in it? What is functioning well, what is not? So that self-empathy piece, really going in there with the quietness of mind, the belief that what I'm doing is based on needs, finding out whether I'm being supported in that. So if we have a whole culture of people doing this, learning to be aware of their own needs, taking responsibility for meeting those needs, we already have the beginning of a new culture, because you know how externally motivated we are. There's so much comparison, there's judgment, there's blame, there's criticism, and who's right and who's wrong, and you know, we're often running. And so then we're making actions out of that foundation. So our foundation for interaction is not strong to start with. We don't have the self-empathy piece.
So the first part of building a culture of empathy is the self-empathy, and that's I've seen self-empathy is sensory awareness, mindfulness of what's going on inside. Is that kind of what you're meaning? It's like, what are the feelings that are going on? What are the values, needs, desires, and having an awareness, a physical awareness, perhaps.
It's all of that. Yeah, it's that proprioceptive awareness, you know, the sweaty palms, the fast heartbeat, all of that. It's the physical, and then the emotions too. You know, what are my feelings? So that's what we're calling the time in, taking that time in to explore that internal place and create the inner calm, the inner peace, the inner tranquility, so that our actions can come from there.
Yeah, it's kind of one thing I've seen with empathy, that is, as we become fearful, and you know, we get that our awareness kind of closes, and that for empathy we need to kind of come to the fear and dissolve the fear, so that our awareness opens more.
I love that you're bringing that up, Edwin, because you know, the brain researchers are showing the physiological component of this, why the fear closes our perception, right? So in family systems, school systems that are based on reward and punishment, a situation is set up that the child feels sometimes physically unsafe, but more oftentimes emotionally unsafe. And there is Daniel Goleman in his book, the Emotional Intelligence, he calls it an hijacking. Emotional hijacking takes place. And in fact, the frontal lobes, those lobes where the executive functioning, you know, the impulse control and regulation takes place. And those are the learning zones of the brain, too. They shut down, and the child, it's called the downshifted brain, and then the child goes into, all right, how do I protect myself here? Am I going to try to distance myself from this, flee? Am I going to rebel and stick up and fight? And at those times, you see, we have to narrow our focus because we feel that we're in danger, that our needs for safety are not going to be met, emotional safety, physical safety. So we prepare ourselves to protect. And it's very hard to be learning anything new at the same time. Teacher in front of a room, I'm supposed to be we call it paying attention, right? All the while, I just had this experience of being embarrassed in front of my peers, and all I want to do is run away. The teacher called on me, I wasn't prepared. So these are some of the dynamics that are going on in classrooms all the time, especially those in those systems that are based on punishment, blame, punishment. We're going to find out who's wrong here. And by gosh, they're going to suffer in some way or another. So we keep that vigilance, that those downshifted brains alive and well a lot of the time in our school systems. So that's why we are in there, both the Learning Success Institute and Kindle Heart, trying to share ways of doing things that keep those frontal lobes open, that keep those learning zones, that keep the children curious and confident and compassionate. Those are my 3 C's lately. And it's a wonderful way to, for teachers, they're finding out it's a wonderful way for them to fulfill their dream, the dream they had when they became teachers. They do this for the most heartfelt reasons. They go into this zone. It's so hard to imagine. I was a teacher for many years, and every day of the week they are there serving our children with all this heartfulness and a lot of mindfulness and great desire to connect. And in many ways, they're not supported to do it. When they find the support, it's just wonderful to watch what happens. I'm at home. I'm home at last. This is what I wanted to do, and now I know how to do it.
And those are the tools you're trying to bring to the teachers, is those tools that support that culture of empathy, culture of compassion.
Exactly. Yeah, tools through the books, of course, and then through the Learning Success Institute, we've developed the SelfPortrait Profiles, what I call the ultimate empathy for students, because it identifies their unique learning styles. And it just unlocks them. When I start talking to a student about his or her learning style, and they will say, "How can you know that about me?" They've answered a series of questions, and I see them moving closer and closer and closer. In fact, I've had students come in the office and they're withdrawn and they're really, they're frightened. And they're in that downshifted brain. And I start talking about them and their learning styles and how they really prefer a hands-on method. And it must be really hard to sit all the time and listen to people talk when you're just so anxious to touch it. And I will see them literally in minutes come out of themselves like this and start moving toward me and a smile. And then often the parents are in the office too, and they'll turn to them and say, see, Mom, see, Dad, I've told you that. Mm-hmm. They start to come alive. And so
they've finally been heard and seen.
They've been heard and seen, and they love it. So that's those learning style profiles. I just, when classrooms embrace that, they start developing a culture of respect. Because is there one learning style that's better than another? No. And the students start seeing that, oh, we can learn in many ways. And so, Jane learns this way, and Joseph learns this way, and we're all in this together. So they start becoming a living and learning community. I see that profile as, in a way, the ultimate empathy for students and the ultimate diversity tool. Creating respect for the diversity that we represent in that classroom.
Well, one thing I like to look at is, like, what does a culture of empathy look like? It's you know, you talked about the kind of the environment that we have now. It's based a lot on judgment, on competition, you know, on rewards, on punishment, and all those ways can create anxiety and fear and detachment and, you know, the lack of engagement, and that's and all the stresses, you know, of the testing, and so that's kind of the situation we have now, and it doesn't seem to be working terribly well. And what you're kind of outlining is, well, there's this other vision of, I call it a culture of empathy. It's where, you know, connection, relationship, and or compassion is important. Yeah. And so, what is that? And you're kind of like saying that that culture of empathy is where everyone is engaged, everyone feels involved, where, you know, the learning really takes place. I mean, how does that? How else would you kind of describe that kind of that world that we're looking to go to?
Yeah. Well, they're emotionally safe, and when we're emotionally safe, we're curious. We are learners by nature, and so, you know, we are asking questions, and we're trying to figure things out, and we're available to what the teachers have to share. So is that helping?
Yeah, it's like it's really the students are feeling safe, and because they're feeling safe, they have less anxieties, and as you have less anxieties, you're more engaged and more involved and more creative, and I mean, there's a lot of studies about that. If you're full of anxiety, that you were describing the brain functions, that you can't really take in new information.
That's right.
At an academic level, and
that downshifted brain. You're not available. You're on guard. You're either, you know, basically in our culture, we give our students, our children, two choices: to comply or to rebel. Either one of those has them in a state of anxiety. If you're complying, then you're not expressing necessarily. You're not part of the process. You're following the rules. You're being good. And I remember this one student at the school in Michigan that I've been working in for many years, who we brought in the no-fault zone game. And we asked, well, it was the principal actually who asked the whole grades K through 6, 4 classes each, so that's 24 classrooms, to stop using the sticks. Now, do you know what the sticks are?
No, haven't.
They're popsicle sticks. And then when you have been bad, done something that the rules that are handed down by the teacher, if you've broken one of the rules, then you have to move your stick one space to the right. And I think that's, I forget what color it is. It's yellow or something. But if you get 3 of those and your stick moves to the red zone, then you have a punishment. So all day long, there's this threat going on, underlying threat. You're going to have to move your stick if you do that again. It goes on and on. So we changed the culture. The teachers studied nonviolent communication. They changed the culture. And I remember it was parent night there. And a new group of students coming in, the teacher was greeting them. And a child came up to this new teacher and said, do you use the sticks in your classroom? And the teacher said, you know, we're not using the sticks anymore. We have a new way of doing things here where we want to find out more about you and what you need, and we're going to work on things together. We're going to make agreements together. And the little child, this is a second grader, embraced the teacher. I mean, she's waist high to the teacher. She's very small. She just grabbed her by the leg and hugged her and said, oh, thank you so much. I never did like those sticks.
That's pretty good.
Yeah. And so this new culture of self-awareness, of course, they're teaching the young people the skills of empathy themselves. That's what the no-fault zone game is meant to do. The teachers are guiding the students in creating their own agreements about what will create the safety we all need for living and learning together. And so this becomes part of the curriculum. All of this is woven into the beginning of the year, and they learn about feelings. The feelings are messengers of needs. They learn about needs being universals. Everybody on the planet has the same needs. They learn about strategies, that yet there are different strategies for meeting needs. And a new video game is not a need. It's a strategy for fun and play. So all of that learning is built in, using the card decks, using the mats. And then all of that groundwork is laid for problem solving throughout the year, conflict resolution. And the students become very able and apt at handling their own conflicts. In fact, in one of the lower school of this charter school we work in, they said that the number of students being sent out of the room, the way they used to do it under their old discipline policies, they'd send children to the office for reprimand. You know, you get your 3 sticks and then you go to the office. So they said that the number of children coming to the office was down by, it was almost non-existent. Wow. Yeah.
So what we're looking at is going from a classroom or an environment of competition.
Yeah.
Competition and kind of judgment and comparison, and, you know, I guess, punishment and reward, to an environment where it's everyone is being heard and creating the environment together. Everyone feels involved in creating maybe the rules or the relationships together.
Yes.
Is that right? Would you say that's kind of like what we're trying to transition to?
Exactly. Yeah, with equal respect for everybody. These students all do the learning style profiles. They're learning that kind of respect for the various ways of learning. We decentralize those classrooms, so it's not the teacher always at the front of the room. I heard that called the sage on the stage. But we decentralized it, so a lot of the learning is more Montessori-like, where the students are investigating materials that are there. materials they're very carefully chosen to teach certain concepts. So they make their way, they can work in twos or threes. I observed in the kindergarten one day, and all of the students were in groups of, well, they were either working as individuals or in groups of twos or threes, sometimes fours, and they were all around the room, all doing different things and keeping track of where they were on their weekly agendas that they had created. It was just phenomenal to see the level of interest, curiosity. There was no time or space for what we called disruptions. They were completely engaged, and that's what a decentralized classroom is. It's not that teacher with that. Oh,
it's like what? Yeah, it seems to model society too. In like a lot of these conferences I go to, there's like one person up in front, kind of talking and being heard, and you know, there's a level of empathy there. I mean, there's a connection, but it seems like there's ways of raising the level of empathy. It's not like an on-off switch. It's just how do we raise that level? And you know, I kind of envision, you know, instead of one person there talking, having people in small groups so that they're communicating, and that would kind of raise the level of empathy. And the same way, what you're talking about is just how do we what are the things that we can do to kind of raise the empathy level within a classroom?
Yeah, exactly. And the teacher with that onus of the lesson plan every day. You know, I've made so many lesson plans, and then I'm so nervous about my lesson plan, and is it going to be well received? And I'm up in front, and they're not listening, and so then I want them to be quiet, and then I have to use the sticks, and it just goes on and on and on. So in my mind, the lesson plan is dead.
Oh, really? Wow.
As a methodology, because when I've got the materials there, very carefully selected with task cards so students can pretty much conduct themselves or each other. Because when one student has completed a task, they can help the other child who's coming along to learn that one. But the teacher is available to interact with the students and answer questions and go over and see how they're doing and comment and give them a bit of more of a challenge where they are, because that's another aspect of the school. The way it's arranged right now is that with all the students expected to be on the same page at the same time, that is not taking stock of what we know about developmental stages. And not all 6-year-olds are at the same place developmentally.
You'd mentioned respect several times, and it's something I've been looking at, wondering what is the relationship between empathy and respect? And sometimes I see respect as being sort of a hierarchical process versus empathy being a connecting process. And I've done, you know, interviews at, you know, at some in different places and in different communities. They'll say, you know, it's like respect is very important, and I don't know. It's like I guess I'm trying to understand kind of the relationship between empathy and respect. Because somehow, like I was just saying, that respect has like I guess I'm repeating myself here, but has that I mean, I did look it up before. I can't remember what the definition was.
You're here, and I'm going to respect you.
Right.
The hierarchy, and that is a really important question. In this book, the Respectful Parents, Respectful Kids, we went into that term and looked at it. It has many different connotations to it. But spectare means to see. And re is to see again. So the way we're defining it is to see the person and look again at their needs.
Mm.
It's a matter of what we're looking for here. So see the person for who they are and look for their needs. And that's what we're calling respect.
So respect is perhaps the opposite would be just not looking at someone, kind of detachment.
Yeah.
And you're saying respect is seeing someone and seeing more deeply than.
Yes. Really look.
Really look.
We're making the RE the really part.
Well,
Really.
I guess the reason I bring that up is there's, you know, in school there was this movement around was it self-esteem movement?
Yes.
And there's been some work by Kristen Neff kind of articulating about exploring self-esteem, that it hasn't really worked. That self-esteem is, well, we're all important. You know, because it's a comparative kind of a concept. Like we're comparing, well, you're important, you know, and I'm important. So it's all based on we're all important. Which is kind of like a hierarchical judgment, you know. So it's there's this it seems like there's this hierarchy versus empathy, which is about connecting, and kind of I'm trying to make sense of those two different worlds. And so Kristen Neff, who's from the University of Texas, she wrote the book Self-Compassion. So she's saying, you know, compassion is like seeing yourself, not judging yourself, you know, having care for, it's basically self-empathy, it seems to me, is the way to go in school versus this notion of self-esteem where everybody thinks that they're great and she's saying it just creates a generation of narcissists. So, you know, kind of differentiating these terms and kind of, there's like an underlying, you know, emotional qualities to each of these. So I guess I was looking at kind of just trying to get a clarity about you know, respect and respect and empathy, but you're saying for you the respect is just seeing someone,
Yes,
and seeing them more deeply.
Exactly, and it goes both ways: young people to adults, adults to young people. I see it as very much a getting closer to looking more deeply. Is it, as I said, the root of the word is to see. Spectare.
Yeah, I guess I kind of have that definition for empathy. That's what empathy is kind of seeing others. It's very difficult. How do we, you know, because we have this whole culture that's based on these different values of competition, of rewards, and kind of going to another culture, you know, it's hard, you know, it's like hard to, at least for me, it's hard to differentiate the different feelings and values and be able to articulate that.
It is, and I wonder how it's done without the language of feelings and needs, without that lens. My hope is we will get there, though, with conversations like these. I'm hearing empathy brought up more and more in the culture. You know, I was thrilled when President Obama first started talking about empathy. And I think that's a large part of the beginning of creating the culture, is talking about it, having the discussion, getting the research. The research is out there. It's coming in more and more. Daniel Siegel, I think he's at UCLA, his Parenting from the Inside Out. It's just a growing field of concern. More and more people seeing how I've worked with homeschooler families for a long time. More and more people seeing how their children are not fitting into the public school system, and parents empathizing with that and finding new structures. so that
So
they're
yeah, so you're seeing kind of this movement building towards empathy, and then one of the ways is to dialogue, which is what we're doing now. And as I ask people, how do we build a culture of empathy? That's come up a lot. You know, we just have to start talking about it and bring it up in conversations. And that's kind of what I'm trying to do with this series of dialogues and with our panel discussions, is just bring people together just to start talking about it and start exploring, because it's kind of a co-creation kind of a process. So it sounds like you're saying the dialogue is one way, and then kind of the science, kind of create more science about understanding how it actually works in our bodies.
Yeah, and parents starting to question the school system when they see their child not thriving in it year after year, because learning styles currently are not considered important. So parents, you know, they see their child not learning, not thriving, and they're asking the question, well, could this be different? And there are groups out here. We have Solomar Academy through the Learning Success Institute, and there are many of us now providing alternatives. And the internet helps people find us. And, you know, the homeschooling population is growing by leaps and bounds. So we are, in effect, developing a parallel education system.
Oh, wow. So it's really, and that's kind of based on parents just kind of taking responsibility, saying, hey, I want the best for my children. I want them to grow up to be caring, empathic, compassionate people. And, you know, the schools aren't doing it. So I'm going to find other alternatives for creating that environment.
That's right. Exactly. So with alternative school systems, with materials, with books, you know, gradually the numbers of us, the critical mass is growing. So in a way, it's a matter of time, it seems to me, that this will become a mandate.
Yeah, it's kind of like, I kind of say that we need a movement kind of behind it. It's going to take it multi-levels. It's like, you know, that I see so many people in the school systems or just around, and they feel kind of isolated around these values. It's like, oh, I'm alone. I want, you know, more empathy, compassion. And it's somehow, I feel like we need more of a movement to coalesce around this as a vision, you know, as a vision. And that, and going at all levels, because we need the whole societal level of, you know, the political level to embrace empathy, and because we're going to have to transform those, you know, the school systems.
Yes, and I think we could work both ends at once.
Yeah,
and it'll, you know, all of it coming at once, and yet this critical piece about self-empathy and acting empathy, finding more and more ways to act it in our own lives, not just know about it, but to act it out, to be it.
Yeah, to embody it.
To embody it, and you get all the people with their, you know, creating their different structures, but having this sense, this deep personal sense of empathy.
Yes, that's kind of how we started. You started with that self-empathy part in our dialogue. It's like, how do we have that awareness of ourselves, of, you know, that mindfulness, that sensory awareness, and that's what I mean, you've done so much around this. It's amazing. I mean, it's like your game zone, No Fault Game Zone, is a tool, as I understand it, for helping to learn how to articulate your feelings and those needs and those values. So you have a vocabulary to express yourself.
Exactly. So that you're expressing from a clear keen connection with yourself. I mean, because we can go out and talk and ramble and rage and give our personal perspective, our opinions, and oftentimes all we do, we speak from the mind, and so we engage the minds of others, and there we are in this pull, this struggle for who's the keenest communicator, or am I going to convince you, or are you going to convince me? And at that level of thought to thought, we're not going to work this out. We need a new language that comes from clarity and centered, not self-centeredness of my selfish desire, although it is in some ways. But that's why we created this game map. We call it the internal operating system. And we've got our feelings, those are in red. We've got our needs, which we call the golden needs. And where we're choosing to put our energy at any time, or our focus at any time, is it going to be into my thought versus yours and the ensuing argument about that? Because there's one author, I can't think of her name right now, but she calls us the argument culture. We just polarize and then we're off and running, trying to convince the other. But if we go to this zone here of our feelings and our needs, and I am listening to yours, you are listening to mine, we can get to that point of realization that our needs are all the same here. Now, your strategies might be different from mine, and that might be separating us. But can we find strategies that would meet both our needs and the most needs possible?
Well, in doing these interviews, do you have any ideas of how to do that in an interview process? I try to, talk to people and engage them in a conversation. I try to try to hear what's important to them. So I was wondering if you have any, kind of feedback on that. Like, how do we make this dialogue that you and I are having be the most empathic dialogue, possible?
You ask the big questions. I must say, when my learning style is thinking, creating. I'm very high in thinking, creating, which means I need a lot of processing time. So let me think on that question, and I will get back to you.
Okay, very good. Well, I try to, I kind of would like to model empathy as much as possible in the dialogues as well. And so I guess that's...
You create connection, though. Because you're listening, you're rephrasing those things, you're asking questions, you're going deeper. And to me, that's what empathy does. It takes the interlocutor deeper. Oh, yes. There is more. In effect, you're saying, tell me more.
Yeah.
Tell me more.
Let's go deeper. Let's explore all that.
Yes, yes. There's no sense of roadblock. Well, what do you mean by that? The attitude of defensiveness, or you're just right there. Marshall Rosenberg has used the image. It's like riding the wave of your interlocutor. That's what empathy is.
Yeah, he has the metaphor of empathy is like surfing, I think, is the metaphor he uses. That because you're kind of riding, you're riding the emotions and that are happening, and kind of trying to stay present with them, and
translating that into needs. Yeah, and I that's what I sense you doing. You're the surfer, and we're riding this wave together.
Yeah.
You're generous. I feel your generosity in asking so many people to share their wave.
Yeah. So, Well, we just talked about the metaphor of Marshall Rosenberg's metaphor of riding the wave of empathy as surfing. Do you have and often the metaphor for empathy, I mean, not the metaphor, but the definition of empathy is a metaphor of standing in someone else's shoes, looking through someone else's eyes. I was wondering if you have a metaphor of what empathy is like to you, like your own creative metaphor. I mean, I can say for me, empathy is like a cornucopia in the sense that we each have feelings and desires and needs and values, and they kind of pour out of us like a cornucopia. And just as you are across from me here, that we both have that, and that when we empathize with each other, we kind of share that cornucopia of experience.
Oh, I love that. And I love metaphors. Oh gosh, I love that question. I think for me, it's a bridge. It's a bridge from my heart to yours. And I had been using the metaphor of the bridge with teachers for a long time about building a bridge for the student to cross over to the whatever it is to be learned. And then I was at an IIT, a 9-day training with Marshall Rosenberg in Santa Barbara a few years ago. And that's where the bridge really solidified for me as the empathic metaphor. Because we would break up into groups of twos and give empathy to one another. And I've never been in a group of people who was so focused. There were 80 of us. And of course, when we're in groups of twos, we don't know how many people were there, but I had the sense that the entire atmosphere was charged with focus on empathy. And it was during these empathy sessions when I was extending empathy to others that at one point the bridge connection, it just became so palpable. It was there, and it was from my heart to theirs, and I've never experienced anything like it. And that bridge kept growing stronger day after day after day, and it stayed with me as an actual it's almost like it's implanted in me, the bridge. And so I know where to go. I can access it now more freely, more with consciousness, which I didn't know to do before. I didn't know that place was so alive for me. So yeah, it's a bridge.
Yeah, so it's a bridge between, as we're standing, not standing, but looking at each other, the empathy is a bridge between us. And,
and it is that flow of what's alive in you, what's alive in me, and that wonderful, it's almost euphoric connection when I can really get there. I'm not always at that euphoric point with it.
Yeah. Well, that's one thing I look at, you know, there's, in terms of how do we, I mean, our culture has kind of competition as almost like an engine that it is used to, you know, keep the economy and everything kind of going in terms of as you know, giving off energy. And I'm really trying to get a sense of what is the engine of empathy, you know, because, and I think what you're talking about, right, what you were talking about, your experience is almost like the engine of empathy. It's that it's so beautiful and wonderful that when we connect with someone else, and it's so fulfilling that in there is like, well, I want to keep this going. There's an energy that wants one to take action or something.
It's so true. To me, out of that energy comes the most delightful creativity. It's not your way, it's not my way, it's our way. It's it's that getting to we. What are we going to create here? And I just find that thrilling. I find it courageous. I find it as engaging. Well, I'm guessing because I'm not a mountain climber or, a spelunker. But I think it's at that level of, it's a depth in us. It's not a mountaintop. It's not the depth of the cave or the great football play, but it's a capacity we have that takes us to parts of ourselves we just are not aware of until we are.
Yeah. And it's that, oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Yeah, it's thrilling to be there. And I do think it's an engine. It certainly keeps me wanting to connect with people in this way.
Yeah, and I think that's the other part you're talking about, is that creativity that happens is as we connect with each other, that there's this creativity generated where it's like the shared creativity, and it
is,
and it's kind of like how do we one thing is how to really be able to articulate that, because I think too I've seen it. I kind of have a metaphor for this, and I feel like our existing society, if you look at the government with the conflict, conservatives, progressives in constant conflict, that we've kind of have a model of nuclear fission model of energy, where it's like this. You bring the atoms together and they break apart, and there's all this energy kind of released, and it keeps the wheels turning. Except that just like with nuclear fission, there's all this waste, of judgments, of resentments, of anger, of wars, of violence, and where do you bury it all? Kind of just the same way. Whereas that empathy is kind of like nuclear fusion. It's where the atoms come together and they join, and it releases energy as well, but it doesn't have all that waste or whatever.
Oh goodness! And isn't that so the way it is when our current models of doing things, when we're trying to manage children's behavior? I go back to thinking of families and schools. We're managing, and then the whole thing blows up, and we're in these power struggles. It's me pushing against you, and you should, and you ought to, and you must. And we get to those breaking points, and the children are shut down. All they want is out, or they're fearful. So empathy just brings us closer together, learning and living together, solving problems together, working out creative solutions because we can hear one another. It's just beautiful when I get this close to it. I don't often have a chance to have conversations like this, but I re-see the beauty of it every time, and I feel it. And since I started so many years ago teaching and working toward, and I remember with my own son when he was born, really touched my heart, opened my perception, and started so many years ago trying to find linkages with young people, with children, that would open them rather than close them. That this path is well worn for me now, and I do feel more confident that we are closer to this happening in more and more venues, more and more homes, more and more schools. I'm hoping businesses have a few inroads with businesses, and I feel really excited when I see the receptivity there. Politics, I don't know. That seems farther down the road for me, or national plans.
Yeah, so it sounds like you're hopeful that I mean, you've been working at this for quite some time. You've put together you're a bit of a pioneer, I feel, who's been kind of hacking away at the path, creating the path, and it's easier for the next person to follow, and the next person, and it starts as a little path, and you've got the books and the games and the workshops and all that you're kind of creating those tools for kind of getting us to that culture of empathy and compassion.
That's been my hope all along, that the path would be simpler, wider, easier for the people coming now. Because I remember my beginning parenting years, this path was just not there. John Holt was out there in education. That was probably after I started parenting. But it was more the management models for parenting were still very much alive. So, yeah.
So what do you see as the main block to getting there on this path? Are you seeing some major blocks or roadblocks?
To getting onto this path?
Yeah, or on the path itself. What's kind of blocking? I mean, for myself, I see kind of financing right now. It's like how to kind of finance this. It's like there's like trillions of dollars for the military. And it's like it seems like we kind of need $1 trillion for building a culture of empathy.
And who are going to be the angel donors to that? Let's start attracting them. For sure. Yeah. Well, let's see. What do we need? I'm thinking there's one move I would like to see. I would like to see parents receive more support somehow. I don't know how to do that. There are a zillion parenting books out there. I have one that's, how many are getting this kind of counsel, because most books parenting books don't even talk about needs, talk a certain amount about feelings. But I would like to see, where schools are concerned, I'd like to see this get into university training somehow, a different view of classroom management. I think that's going to have a very big effect. Because teachers are in classrooms. Where have we all come from? Where are all our children headed at this point in history, in education history? So I tend to go back to, I'm hearing you reaching out for the $1 trillion. Right? My scheme is more within the system somehow at this point. I would love the $1 trillion. I would not turn it down by any means, and yet I'm committed to finding pathways within what we've already created. And I think that teachers, because they go into education with such a heartfelt desire to connect with the young people, that if they were offered something different in their university training, besides this reward and punishment model, I think that they would engage it, and that could be a new beginning there. And then parents can learn from the schools, perhaps eventually. It's not as solid, as predictable a structure as I would like, but it's what I'm hoping for right now and trying to influence right now.
Yeah, so it sounds like it's kind of get empathy for the parents, so that the parents are somehow they're receiving kind of being heard and being listened to and kind of receiving that kind of attention as well, because if they're under stress,
Yes.
it's hard for them to pass on. And the same with teachers. If teachers are under stress, you know, from the hierarchy, from their workloads, and if they're not being heard, that it's just going to pass down. So it's almost like a chain reaction.
Yes.
Right? It's like a lot of times you hear, well, the kids, I mean, the teachers need to be more empathic to the kids, but the teachers are overwhelmed and stressed. The same with the parents. So it's just this whole chain reaction. That's like, how do we,
right,
you know, create a chain reaction of empathy?
Exactly.
Somehow.
Exactly. And there's nothing like getting the appetite for empathy by having received it. So when we go into a school to work with it, we are saying as below above, or as above below. So everybody is learning how to give empathy to everybody else. It's all about identifying feelings and needs, administrators to teachers, teachers to administrators, teachers to teachers, teachers to students, students to teachers, students to students. It's just whoom, shimmering, echoing off of every being in the culture.
Yeah, I think that's what you're sharing there is like, that's kind of the vision of a culture of empathy. Right? That's the whole system is kind of supportive of
yes.
empathy, and how do we get from here to there? There is some hope in terms of the academics. I just interviewed Nadine Dolby. She's in the curriculum development department for multicultural education at Purdue, and she just wrote a book on the whole teaching framework as it is now, and how that whole multicultural education needs to move to empathy as a foundational organizing value.
Oh, fantastic!
Yeah,
I want to see that book, because that. Yeah. Oh, fantastic.
Yeah, if you check the homepage, the interview is there and the link to her book. And then there's a group at Arizona State that's doing the same thing, but they're doing it within the social work department. They're educators teaching new social workers, and they're saying that that social work is basically all about empathy, and it's been totally ignored.
Oh, my goodness.
So they've been writing, you know, some articles, and they're working on a curriculum for teaching for educators, for social workers.
Oh, fantastic. And see, this is how it's going to happen. And
yeah.
The parts are all there. And this reminds me of the no-fault zone game, how it is meant to be used in history studies, literature. I mean, can you imagine each of the students taking a character in the novel that's being, high school, the novel that's being read, and then they speak about the feelings and needs of that character, and we've got all the characters interacting with each other from the feelings and needs perspective, and the history where we've got the sides of the different conflicts, and the students are taking parts in it and speaking of the feelings and needs of each of the main characters, the main figures in that historical debate or conflict.
So it's bringing empathy into understanding of history. So you're kind of putting yourself into the position of all the historical characters, and you know, the arts are big in that too. I mean, the arts, I think, is in acting, and so it's like, it seems to me that all the pieces are out there. It's somehow, I mean, I tend to, like, in this conversation, I'm kind of, you know, I kind of go this direction, that direction. Sometimes I feel like I'm not as systematic as I could be, but you know, it's like how to kind of lay all this information out in a systematic way. I guess you've kind of done that with your books. So,
yeah, the desire for some integration of all this that could make it more accessible, or it always comes down to, what do I do next? What's my next step? Right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, talking about next steps, we've been at it for about an hour, so I usually go for kind of a maximum of an hour, and I kind of feel like I could talk to you 4 hours and kind of start going into all the different, areas and explore them. And so I hope we can, kind of continue this conversation and maybe do other, more specific, topics or panel discussions. We've already done one panel, but so I just put it out there as another possibility. And so is there any kind of feeling, anything that should be covered in kind of conclusion?
Whoa. Well, one thing I'm noticing, I think that we share a learning style, Edwin, and that I think you're also thinking creating, because we love to go in depth on all kinds of themes. So I'd like to keep that in mind for the future, and appreciate your invitation to stay in the loop, so to speak. And well, let's just keep finding more and more ways to speak about empathy and take it to a broader and broader audience and create this drumbeat. Let's all do it together.
Yeah, I think we're on the same path here, so really appreciate this this dialogue and taking part in it, and to be continued.
Thank you so much. To be continued, indeed.
See the world through other people's eyes. Empathy is a quality of character that can change the world.